Hello and welcome to part 5 of this series. Today we'll be talking about inputs and why it's actually really important to ask for a user input. This is the only way to be able to interact with the program and for the user to actually communicate to the program what they want. Um, so for example, let's say you want to ask your user how old they are to see maybe how old they'll be in the next couple of years or um, something like that, or how old they are based on the birth year. This will only be possible with inputs because we can't predict their birth year or we can't predict their age. So let's start off by creating a variable. Let's say birth year maybe is our variable, birth year, okay. And then we can type in the input function and we can ask what we want them to input. So let's say, what is your birth year? I like to use these colons to separate my question from the actual input answer. And notice how I use quotation marks. You can also use apostrophes, but this is important because your question should be a string. Putting anything else could create an error of some sort. So it's important to use those quotation marks or your apostrophes based on your preference. I'm using quotation marks today. And then if you want, you can use these colons. It's up to you as the programmer, the designer of your program, how you want to present the user with your question. I like doing this. Now I can print it out just to see if my input's working. So print birth year. Okay. Now, if I were to run the program and wait for it to load, I'll be presented with the question, what is your birth year, straight in the console. And I can present my reply typing it in. Let's say I was born in the year 2000, just for fun. Now, printed. After printing it, you get 2000 back. So it's just taking your input and printing it. And it's really important to note that, for example, if I were to have an error here, let's say I have a random variable and it's wrong, let's say birth year 21, that doesn't exist. We don't have a variable named birth year 21. Point is, the program reads from top to bottom. So even though we're going to have an error here, it doesn't show the error until your program actually gets there. If it never gets there, then it won't do anything. But it will get here because it will ask for your input. And then afterwards, it's going to try to print out birth year 21. It's going to be confused because it doesn't know what birth year 21 is. So if I were to do this, now here we go. It's going to say that that doesn't exist. It doesn't have that variable. It's an undefined variable if we go into our problems tab here in Visual Studio Code. So that's really important to know. And another problem that we might be facing is, let's say we want to add or we want to know what their age is given their birth year. So how we can do that is type in our current year. So currently we're in 2020 and we can subtract 2020 from their birth year, correct? And we will get their age back, correct? No, that's not right in this case because birth year is a string. We're asking for a string. Using the input function will automatically give the variable a string data type. And if I were to run this, the program is going to be confused because you are, well, after I type in my input, you are trying to subtract an integer from a string. So that's kind of weird and confusing for the program. I can solve this by one of two ways. I can create another variable and just title it birth year 2, for example, or 1, whatever. And I can change the data type by typing in int birth year, right? And it will change the string to an integer because it will try to identify that. And now I can actually subtract it if I were to change that variable. So now running the program, say I was born in 2000, and now it shows that I'm 20 years old, which is correct. But what if I don't want this extra line of code and I just want to use birth year? What if? Now, I can do this by just defining my whole entire input as a certain data type. So I can say integer, I can say float, I can say string, I can use whatever data type I want. Um, I like to define it as a string if I were using a string, just in case. I know that input will automatically give me a string as the data type saved into the variable, but I want to also have that extra assurance that it will be saving as a string no matter what's going on. Um, but in this case, we want an integer. So what we can do is type in int before all of this. So what we're telling the program here is we are asking for the user's input, and inside of this parentheses, we're asking the question. So what is our question? Their input, and then afterwards we're changing the data type of the whole thing. So basically, to reduce it and make it easier to understand, what we have here, once we type in that 2020, is this, or 2000, because that was our birth year, sorry. Um, we essentially have this, and then we're changing that data type from a string to an integer. Now let's go back to what we had before. Whoops, I don't want that. And if we were to run the program, we get 20. Let's try that one more time. So just type in 2000, and we get 20 as our answer.